Welcome back. There are lots of different changes you can make to the speed of your clips in DaVinci Resolve, such as creating freeze frames, fast forward and quick rewind effects, fast forward and quick rewind effects, and of course, slow motion. However, I'm going to show you in this video how to get the very best out of your constant speed changes. Let's start by speeding a clip up. This shot is a good example, as I want to increase the speed of this clip to emphasize the plane's movement in flight. Using the speed controls in the inspector means I can adjust the clip either by adjusting the percentage of the speed or the number of frames per second, but more on that second option shortly. I'll set this clip to 200%, so it will run at twice its original speed.
It's really important. Every shot was original and that everything was real.
It's probably worth noting at this point that speed changes like this always occur from the head of the clip in the timeline. This means by speeding this clip up, I'm actually using more footage of the original media, but over the same duration of the clip in the timeline. If I increase the speed to something extreme, such as 800%, then you'll see the clip become shorter, because at this speed, there are no more frames to the original clip.
It was really important. Every shot was original and that everything was real.
Of course, this assumes I'm not rippling the timeline. I'll just reset the speed change I made and trim the clip in the timeline back out to fill the gap. This time I will enable the option to ripple timeline and then adjust the clip speed to 200%. As you can see, the clip's duration is shortened and the rest of the clips after the start of my adjusted clip are rippled by the same amount. As you can see, this can be quite a disruptive process in your timeline, so be careful when enabling this option. I'll just undo that last change, uncheck Ripple Timeline, and adjust the speed to 200%.
It was really important. Every shot was original and that everything was real.
The same principles apply when reducing a clip's speed, except the clip will get longer rather than shorter. However, when slowing a clip down, there's some other things that you need to bear in mind. In this timeline, I'd like to slow this shot down for dramatic effect.
The culture, the food,
Now this clip was shot at a far higher frame rate than I'm working at in this timeline for this precise reason. So first of all, let's check and see what frame rate it actually is. In the inspector for this clip, the Info tab will show me some basic information regarding the media file, including the native frame rate. As you can see, this shot was filmed at 59.94 frames per second. Choosing to reveal the timeline in the media pool shows me that this timeline has a frame rate of 23.976 frames per second. This is what we would often refer to as a mixed frame rate timeline. Now there's no problem about leaving the footage as it is. Resolve will simply play back every second or third frame in the timeline to match the clip's original speed. However, if I start to slow that speed down, then those unused frames become very valuable. Let me close the media pool, switch back to the timeline, and reopen the video tab in the inspector. In the speed change controls, I can see that this clip is running at 100%, but at 23.976 frames per second. This is a little confusing because the frames per second in the speed control refers to the clip playing back in the timeline, not in its original frame rate. It would be more intuitive if it would list me the original frame rate of the clip, but that's just not the way that it's going to work. So in this case, I'm going to have to do a little bit of maths. So I need to work out what percentage of the target frame rate, 23.976 is, of the clip frame rate, 59.94, which gives me 40. So to reduce the speed of this clip to the timeline frame rate, I need it to play back at 40% of its original frame rate, resulting in a lovely slow motion shot using all the frames of the original media. But what happens if I want to slow this clip down further, or slow a clip down that was shot at the original timeline frame rate? This clip's native frame rate is already at 23.976 frames per second, but I still want to slow it down slightly to emphasize the on-screen design. Heading to the speed controls in the Video tab in the inspector, let's reduce the speed to 50%, dropping the clip's frame rate to below 12 frames per second. Playing this clip back on the timeline results in a less than smooth camera movement. The reason for this is that Resolve still has to play the clip back at the timeline frame rate, so it just simply repeats every frame in order to make up the difference. In fact, you can see this as I step through the shot frame by frame, with only every other frame advancing the shot forward. This is usually the quickest and easiest process for any NLE to achieve. So is there anything that we can do about this? Well, that depends on your footage, but it's worth trying these next few steps to see if any of them will work for you. Firstly, let's shift our attention a little lower in the inspector to the Retime and Scaling options for this clip. And we can start by changing the retime process. Now, unless it's been changed in the project settings, nearest is usually the default, which is what we've just seen. So the next option is frame blending. Instead of a single repeated frame, this creates the extra frames needed by mixing 2 frames of the original footage together. For footage without a lot of motion, this can often be enough, but as you can see, it still creates a noticeable blur on this shot, especially in the guy's hair, and you can see the results again as I step through frame by frame. The next step up though is Optical Flow. This is an intensive process that uses motion estimation to literally create new frames from the original footage. I know, sounds like witchcraft, doesn't it? Let me switch the retime process to Optical Flow for this clip. And now when I play the clip back, you can see that it's much smoother than before. And if I step through this shot frame by frame, you'll notice that the blurring has all but gone, with new frames having been generated in its place. If you're having trouble playing the Optical Flow clips back on your system, try setting the render cache to Smart to automatically cache the results. But just before you go enabling Optical Flow on all of your footage, it's worth bearing in mind that this works best when you've got consistent motion through the shot. If you've got 2 elements that pass in front of each other, then that can actually cause the pixels to sort of ripple and distort. Let me show you this shot of the lady hanging the t-shirt. As you can see from the inspector, this clip is 23.976 frames per second, just like the timeline. I'll reduce the speed to 50%. That, of course, results in the repeated frames. Next, I'll try frame blend. Better, but let's see what Optical Flow can do. It gives much better results on the movement of the shirt itself, but look at the rippling of the pixels as she brings her hand down, a classic result of Optical Flow analysis. All is not lost though, because I can try adjusting the motion estimation controls. These controls will only become active if you have Optical Flow set in the retime process, and can give better results depending on the footage. Try the standard options first, followed by the enhanced options. Any of these might work with your footage. If that fails though, there's always the nuclear option, speed warp. Now this is an incredibly intensive process, so much so that when I've used it, my computer has occasionally become unresponsive. You have been warned, use it sparingly. Enabling speed warp for this clip and letting the timeline cache gives a much better result. It's still not perfect, but played back at full speed, I think it's a good enough compromise. In the next part of this tutorial, I'll be taking a look at some of the other speed changes that we can make, including variable speed adjustments. So get subscribed to get notified. But until then, take care.